right, I'll get everyone started. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're excited to kick off this webinar between Rain and Awardco. We are joined by Shohan Rahman, Vice President of Sales and Partnerships in Rain, and Dave Christensen, Senior Vice President of Marketing at Awardco. During this webinar, if you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we will get to them. I'm going to hand it over to Sho now.
I just want to share before we get into some introductions of myself as well as Dave, excited today to talk about the retention stack, right? How recognition and financial health really drive workplace loyalty. We know frontline employees aren't quitting because they hate the job. They're quitting because they feel invisible and are financially stretched. Recognition and financial health are the two highest impact benefits in today's frontline labor market, and together they're even more powerful. So today, we're going to discuss how financial stress is quietly driving your turnover, why recognition and financial health compound each other, and what a zero cost, zero disruption rollout looks like for HR and payroll. So to kick that off, I'll give a brief introduction to myself and then I'll pass it to Dave to talk about himself. But I really wanted more share about my background. And just so everyone knows, you can actually scan the QR codes for our direct LinkedIn page. So mine has my page. Dave, you can go directly to his page as well as Tanya's and connect with us on LinkedIn. But what I want to share about my background, yes, I'm the VP of Sales and Partnerships here, but took a while to get here. Throughout my career, employee culture, employee experience, and just HR have been kind of the foundation of everywhere I've worked. From starting my career at the University of Phoenix, moving around, working very closely with HR, going to Zappos and learning about how to deliver happiness in an organization and using that as a basically as a propeller to my career, able to really work in various fields and look at HR. At Paychex, I actually helped with 401k benefits as well as HR services. How do you recruit, retain, and engage your talent through additional benefits like a PEO or health benefits and various things to constantly think about that employee experience. And then moving throughout my career, working in global roles at Square, as well as now here at Rain, working very close to building organizations with HR that focus on, again, culture, recognition, employee financial wellness, etc. So really excited to talk about that. I've been at Rain for over a year and a half now, and just really excited to continue to drive the mission that Rain has, where we're trying to help basically employees have access to their pay prior to payday. I'll pass it to Dave to talk a little bit about his background.
Yeah, thanks. Happy to be here. My name's Dave. I've been with Awardco for about 2.5 years, and we're really excited to dive into this topic. I lead our marketing efforts here, and we'll get into it, but what we do is kind of pair all of those different vectors of making sure an employee feels seen, heard, engaged, along with the financial wellness to ensure that cultures are built the right way, built around the right values, and that we are building strong employee bases, all to keep our best talent and give our best talent the opportunity to grow. So we are an employee rewards and recognition and engagement platform at our core. And those programs that we deliver through our software and through our marketplace of redemptions power a lot of different initiatives. And I'm sure we'll talk about some of those today, but happy to be here and happy for the partnership.
Thanks so much, Dave. So as I mentioned, go through 3 different areas. This is going to be a fireside chat. Obviously, if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A box and we will get to those at the end and really open it up for more discussion. Well, my goal here is to have a conversation with Dave about several of the items that I'm going to focus on. And in the beginning, it's really like what turnover is looking like. The first section is really what's happening in the workplace, and the data that I'm providing is from Gallup, WorkHuman, Mercer, and PwC. They've done a lot of studies and shared a lot on what's going on with burnout, with recognition, with turnover, with financial wellness. And I'm going to share 8 specific stats one by one, and Dave and I will just talk a little bit about that as we go, and then we'll move into the next thing, which will be more of a how our solutions do help each other. So really, why we're here again, I'll kick it off with this first statistic that I think is really powerful, right? Financial stress is everywhere now. 59% of employees report being stressed about their finances, and 49% say their compensation is not keeping up with rising costs. 53% have less than $5,000 saved for emergencies. And actually, when you try to go even lower number, $500, It's like barely anybody has that. It's almost like 70% or so don't have that much saved aside. So I'm going to open this up, Dave. I mean, this is something that's out there. I think we hear it with gas prices, with people aren't getting increases, raises, layoffs out there. What are you just seeing and hearing when it talks about finances and the economy with the employee workforce?
It's a great question. We find ourselves on the road a lot with both our customers and other HR leaders out in the wild. And one of the things that they're dealing with is there are multiple different areas now to keep an employee feel like that they're being taken care of, both from a well-being perspective, but also whether their work is being seen and recognized. And one of the things that we're seeing is you can't focus on any one of these things and solve the problem. There are three or four different moving parts that kind of have to compound together, to use your term, Shohan. So financial wellness can be there and we can compensate fairly. But if work is not being seen and recognized and people aren't being promoted for that work, or if feedback is not being heard, no one is going to stay at a job very long that they feel highly compensated for, because that eventually leads to burnout. Burnout is when we don't feel valued in our work, we don't feel connected to our work. So what we've seen from different HR leaders is they're trying to connect these different parts together. And one of the areas that recognition comes together is there's a number of things that we do, and we've done a number of surveys, and it's really interesting. As much as we think it all always comes back to finances, there's an element of people wanting to feel the emotional deposits that their employees are making, or that their employers are making with them. A lot of the times that comes through different engagement activities throughout the company, but a lot of times that's individual recognition. Sometimes it's monetary, and that might be through spot bonuses or incentives programs or whatever it might be. But a lot of times what we're seeing is also the non-monetary recognition paired with, of course, a fair compensation and salary as close as we can get there is what's driving the most success. And so our biggest learning from what we're seeing is whether it's financial well-being, whether it's making sure that employees are motivated at work and making sure that they're seen for the work that they're doing. If you over rotate on any one of those, you tend to still have a retention issue. So you have to find a way to compound the three together to get the best result, and that's difficult. And I'm sure we'll unpack some of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you say it like that, where it's all these different things, I like to just like lump sum it into culture, right? Like it's all culture, right? Do you have a culture where you're providing benefits? Do you have a culture where you're doing recognition? Do you have a culture where you're listening to feedback? All of those things tied together in and create this culture. So I'm completely in alignment with that. I think the other big thing with the economy, and you kind of gave some of this, right? It always can't be monetary that solves it. Like we are in a position where companies aren't giving huge raises at the end of the year, right? Bonuses aren't the same. So it's what else can you do in order to still make that work environment worth it for that individual to feel valued? So it's not always going to be monetary, but I think we have to be aware that people aren't happy with their finances, but we have to figure out other ways to make them happy. So spot on that. The second statistic I have here of the impact on productivity and mental health, right? Financially stressed employees are nearly 5 times more likely to be distracted at work. Among Gen Z workers, 85% say financial anxiety directly impacts their mental health, and 71% report decreased productivity as a result. I think this ties into where we're seeing this also with the new generation, with Gen Z, etc. But mental health is being a bigger issue. I see companies also offering mental health days now, which is a fantastic thing to do because you're taking it seriously. And I know there's EAP programs out there too, where people probably don't adopt, but can get mental health assistance. I've actually used it for my daughters, my teenagers, where it's like, hey, let's have you talk to somebody, and we have an EAP service. But I think it comes back to, again, when you're not providing that right culture and getting that person valued, you're infecting their mental health when it comes down to it, right? Any thoughts on that from your end?
Yeah, definitely supportive and agree with what you're saying. Kind of on the mental wellness and the well-being side of things. It's interesting how these can all influence one or the other. One example, monetary to your example, doesn't solve everything, but what we're seeing is a lot of that mental wellness can be improved or worked on through connectivity with the employer, but also fellow employees and friends at work. And so there's an element of Sometimes we're in a 100% remote environment. Other times we're in a hybrid. Other times we're in a completely in office. Across all three of those vectors, if we can provide avenues, programs, affinity groups, mentorship, whatever it is, for us to connect with each other in those different working environments, again, we see that those survey results on mental well-being tend to improve because ultimately, if you feel alone or siloed, which we all can if we're working remotely, that can take a toll on somebody. So what we do is both through our platform, but through kind of our consulting and our center of excellence, is we try and aim to put some of those types of programs in place. Some of the things we often forget about, like I said, affinity groups or simple get-together groups or mentorship programs that can improve that mental wellness score. And so I would add a plug for that type of approach.
No, great point. Literally this morning, I had a interview with a candidate, and the candidate asked me, "What do you all do in a remote world to connect everybody?" And I love that type of question because similar to what you're saying, like I think it's really important to figure out ways, actionable ways outside of just even benefits. This is where just sharing through experience, culture, and HR, like creating a remote work environment. I told them, hey, we do like virtual office hours where we could all get together, similar to what you're saying, bringing people together and work together like you were in the office. We were talking about our weekend updates where every Monday everybody shares what they did over the weekend because then you have a connection with those individuals. We talked about utilizing video on your weekly communication because then you can actually see the person versus just reading emails. So to your point, right, it's finding all those different ways to create that connection so you could truly get better. Continuing on, the cost of employers. Right? John Hancock research estimates that unaddressed financial stress costs organizations more than $1,900 per employee per year in absenteeism, presenteeism, and lost productivity. One of the things that I really highlight here, there's two things actually. One is that we saw in one of the articles a typical employee, because they're distracted, is missing about 19 to 20 days of work hours that they're actually not working and thinking about all these things that are affecting them, right? The culture, the mindset, and the mental health, the financial stress, etc. And the other thing that we've seen here is that people are actually not calling out because they're sick. They're calling out because they go and work DoorDash, Uber, Instacart, TaskRabbit, all these gig economy jobs because they could get paid that day or they need something to take care of and they go do that versus go to work. Again, I know that's a little different than what you guys are doing at Awardco, but any thoughts on, that distraction that's out there for employees?
Yeah, it's definitely real. There's a pressure to find and build, financial health immediately, and it's a long-term play. You mentioned the DoorDash and the Uber. I'll never forget years back at one of the first startups I joined. I remember the head of FP&A was doing DoorDash at night, and I remember thinking I was young professional. I was like, well, that can't be a great sign if he can see all the financials and he's out there doing DoorDash at night. I was, out of school. I was thinking, well, are we being fairly compensated here? And I do think we get distracted, and no one employee is the same. And so one employee's financial equation is vastly different than another. And so trying to find a way to keep folks productive, not distracted is very difficult. $1,900 per employee per year, that probably varies widely. One interesting thing that we see, so when we engage and recognize our people through cultural values, through purpose-built spot bonus programs or incentive programs, whatever that might be, what we found is that, in a monetary program, let's say, we do points per dollar. So let's say someone gets 500 points one quarter for hitting a certain milestone or hitting a certain goal. What's interesting, if you put $500 on someone's paycheck, they're going to like scoff at that and almost feel insulted. But when it's done through the right avenue of I'm being recognized visibly in another way, in a different platform, publicly or privately, in front of my leaders, they understand what I'm doing, and there's a $500 essential spot bonus there that I can go redeem how and where I want and spend with my hobbies or family. That's different. That's almost an emotional deposit above that $500. So what I will say there is what we see with different organizations who are building culture is you often think you have to throw hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars at a problem. But when you combine it with the right tone of recognizing people for the work that they're doing, and in the right case, certain monetary values that aren't attached per se to their W-2 and their paycheck in the traditional sense, it goes a long way.
I'm with you. We have this discussion all the time in various sales orgs. President's Club, right? Is President's Club something you want to just throw a bonus in the check, or do you want to make it an experience and create something much more? Because when you throw it in the check, there are going to be some of those employees that just love that and want it in their check. But is it really getting that same type of psychological effect that you're talking about when it isn't just associated with it? So completely see that point. And just again, to continue on, tying back to more of a distraction, another article said that stress translates directly to the bottom line. Financially stressed employees are nearly 5 times more likely to be actively distracted while on the clock. I think that ties into everything we were just saying. The next one I have here is that voluntary turnover driven by burnout costs companies 15 to 20% of their total annual payroll budget, right? 1/5 of their budget is basically costs that they could avoid, but they're having it from voluntary turnover. Yeah, thoughts on this? Because that's a pretty big chunk of change for any organization.
This one I say is the most felt problem from what we've seen. How much it costs to recruit and to put time and resources behind interviewing and to on-ramp and to train and to do all of these things, and then only to do it again months later when you lose that type of employee is it can sink a business at the end of the day if we can't retain talent. And so we see this most felt on the front lines with more, what I would say, frontline and deskless type workers, whether it's in food and services, whether it's in manufacturing, kind of these offline types of industries. That attrition can get out of control such that, some businesses lose half their workforce in a 30 to 60-day period. And to constantly be up leveling people and training them and bringing them up to speed is just such a massive cost and a distraction, and it can be paralyzing to a business. And so, again, you have to have purpose-built tools for purpose-built moments. And one of the things that we've seen is that onboarding, initial onboarding phase of an employee is the most critical phase of the employee in their journey. And we've done studies that showed, even in offline or traditional, kind of tech-oriented roles, is that when those folks are recognized within the first 90 days, specifically from a manager, the likelihood that 24 months later that they're still there is 10 to 20% higher in some cases. And so sometimes we bring people into the fold, we launch, but we don't learn with them, and we launch and we leave them. And so that onboarding moment is critical. And so that's what we try to do with our programs and our software and everything that we do. And you don't necessarily even need that. If you can focus on an employee's journey early on, whether that's 30 days, 6 months, you're going to make deposits that keep them around for a longer period of time. And so our view is make sure you're not just taking a generalized approach across the journey. Have a purpose-built tool and program for those different areas of the journey, starting with onboarding is what we think about.
Yeah, what I'm hearing from you is intentionality matters, right? Be intentional of what you're doing when it comes to benefits. And then 2, onboarding, I agree with you, is such a critical part, not only in like my own experience working and hiring people, but what we see at the Rain side is a lot of times employees are, especially the frontline employees, they're transitioning jobs. They might not have a job for a while. They take on a new job. So they have a couple weeks, they're interviewing, they're looking for a job. They find this job. That job is now paying biweekly in the arrears. So they're not going to get paid for about 3 weeks or so since they started. They're dealing with transportation, lunch to bring, new clothes. And they don't actually have access. So they might join a job, realize the pay's not going to be there, and again, not stick around because they need to go wherever it's going to be faster pay, whether it's another company for more money, faster pay, or that gig economy, and they're losing it. And to your point, you can make that 90-day mark. It truly will keep them longer. So we see that as well within our industries. Absenteeism, we talked a little bit about this. Chronically financially stressed employees are 63% more likely to miss work and 2.2 times more likely to be actively searching for a new job compared to financially secure peers. Really, I think it's stressing again that even when you have employees there, they're probably looking at other things if they're not either happy, they're not being seen and valued, or they're not making ends meet, right? It's not going to be that long that they'll stick around, and they're probably actively looking. I'll keep it going since I know we touched on absenteeism a little bit. This is what you were just saying about recruiting and the cost of it. Replacing an employee costs between 0.5 to 2x their annual salary in recruitment, onboarding, and lost operational momentum. Out of your personal experience, have you had a lot of issues when it comes to recruiting and like finding talent? And what are other things that you've done to just help you, maybe outside of Awardco, Rain, etc., that you use to help you recruit talent?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm a former founder myself, and so I've gone through many iterations and failings of what it's like to hire and build a company. The one, I hate to pull it up into platitudes, but the one thing that really does remain true is take your time, hire slowly. I think often there's just like there's an equation of product market fit. How does a product grow within the market? There's what I believe to be a talent company fit. And I think we are so distracted sometimes with filling a role where we need to make sure that it's the right person for that role. And that requires extra steps to the interview process at times. That requires an extra, blind reference check here and there. That requires sometimes, some companies are now rolling out work trials. I talked to a company the other day who is growing so quickly and builds culture so intentionally that they do work trials from 6 to 12 months. And now, when I say work trial, they're paid as if they were a full-time employee under that salary, but it's not official for 6 to 12 months. Now, that's an extreme example, but that's a long-term view that they're taking and saying we are investing so intentionally in our culture here. And it's two-sided. We want them to know what they're getting into, and we need to know what we're getting into. So I would take your time with making sure you're bringing in the right people. And then certainly the onboarding matters, setting them up for success. And I believe in specialization. You need to make sure that those roles have clearly defined avenues for what makes them successful. Because again, if they're not hitting those metrics or feeling driven towards anything, they're gonna feel that they're without purpose.
No, great point. I love that trial aspect, right? It's like a contract or temp job. My first leadership role, we actually at that company used temps initially, and then they would work about 90 days before we would fully make it. I haven't actually seen that in a long time, but you're spot on where that could be very intentional and a great way to ensure you have the right culture fit. I was just, again, I talked about the interviews. I did multiple this morning. With one of them on the recap, we talked exactly what you're saying, right? Like, how many times have we actually interacted with this person? You want to have multiple insight. You want to reach out, do some of those blind references. I saw a mutual connection. I reached out, found out some more additional, but it's like, how do you know, like, that person is, the right person? And culture fit is such a big thing. And then to your point, you get the right culture. You want to make sure you're doing all the right things in order to maintain that person and retain that person, not spend all that time and then lose that person due to lack of recognition, lack of culture, lack of leadership, etc. Continuing on, last one I have here. Gallup found that high individual engagement without overall personal well-being still leads at 61% higher likelihood of burnout. Regular recognition acts as a multiplier, bridging the gap between high performance and personal thriving. Again, I think it's a culmination of everything we're saying. Any last words before I move on to the next subject on like that personal workplace well-being and all these things that we can do?
No, I think we've touched on a lot of the things here. The one thing that stands out is so much of this starts and ends with leadership. So none of this works unless the leadership level is bought in, both at kind of your frontline leadership, but of course from the executive team. When people are seen, heard, engaged, surveyed, when their feedback is heard, that goes a long way. And often just making sure that people know that feedback is being actioned from a leadership level or that effort is being recognized from a monetary and non-monetary standpoint, regardless of how much it is what keeps people ultimately engaged. And so, as we bring people in our organization, I always believe in being upfront about, what are our leadership principles? How do we lead as a company? And I think none of this works unless you have buy-in from your leadership levels.
Spot on. I did another webinar like this not too long ago, and it was like, what do you do to prevent burnout? And it was like, again, what you're saying, right? Culture, leadership, company benefits, that financial wellness, and that recognition aspect. All of these things truly matter. But I think a lot of people miss that leadership part, where it's like we could roll out all the great things, but if we don't actually have people that believe in it, that are reinforcing it, it's also not going to happen. So it's really important, frontline leaders as well as all the way up to the executives, that they are looking at it the same way. All right, I'll go on to the next section, which really is how these types of benefits, when we're talking about their financial health as well as recognition, truly compound each other, and the statistics that we see when you do put these things in place. Before I go into it, we'll let everybody again know, feel free to drop in any Q&A, even comments, etc. When we get to the end, we'll actually address any of those questions that you guys have. So feel free to use that function now as we're transitioning into this next section. I believe I have 5 points I wanted to make here with these. Again, ties to everything that we're talking about, but here's where we see the direct impacts when you actually work on financial health and you work on recognition, right? Employees who receive high quality strategic recognition are up to 90% less likely to report feeling burned out at work always or very often. These poll surveys are out there. We know we ask it. We see strategic recognition. I know you're going to talk about Awardco more, but when you say strategic recognition, like, what are your thoughts as far as how Awardco has strategic recognition?
Yeah, so we take multiple approaches. Like I said, there's no one avenue to fix burnout. It's going to be an equation with different variables. And so the variables we see are one, on the layer of the employee journey. So like I've mentioned, the onboarding through the service anniversaries and milestone recognition moments, to the everyday, always visible and always on peer-to-peer recognition, manager to employee recognition type programs, and then even all the way through, retirement and those types of initiatives. We power all of those. What we also do is layer in, okay, that's how an employee feels seen, but what about how they feel heard? And this is another big part of reducing burnout is we need to engage employees, and the engagement systems of old simply would survey and put those results on a shelf, and it was data that we would address once a year and wonder why it's not improving. So from a leadership standpoint, to reduce burnout, we have to be okay with surveying employees and being okay with what we hear in those surveys. But we need an actionable item. And what we've seen is that the recognition programs, the financial well-being programs, are avenues to correct burnout. And I think it's important to define burnout. Burnout is not people not liking to do work. In fact, if you're highly engaged in work, if you feel like you're seen and valued for the work that you're doing and fairly compensated, people will work above and beyond. Burnout is simply a lack of connection to the work we're doing, or that we don't feel that the work we do matters much. And so as we think about those variables across the employee journey, what are the financial tools? What are the engagement tools? What are the recognition programs that we have that can influence an employee at any given time and make sure that they're engaged is the right, that's a strategic way to approach it, rather than just say, we're only going to do a 10-year, plaque and a milestone, and let's hope someone's here in 10 years to get that.
Absolutely. I think I love that Awardco has all these tools to help with that strategic. The biggest thing I share, not only with my frontline leaders across the organization, and my philosophy is, don't be flavor of the month, right? Like, if you're going to put a plan in place, be intentional, create a process, hence the companies like Awardco. But even within an individual themselves, if you're a frontline leader or a director or VP, right? Like, if hey, every person's birthday, you want to send that handwritten note, which is something I do. Like, I have that process set in place, right? The email or notification comes a week in advance, tells me to do it, put it in the mail, have my happy birthday stickers right here, stamps, stick it in the mail and send it off. But it's a system I create, so it's not always. Or if you're going to do a weekly spot bonus recognition, create a process out of it. If you're going to do a monthly award, make it a real deal, versus you do something and then it dies down. And then what happens is people they don't have that trust. And to your point, then they start not feeling connected, valued, and then burnout happens, right? So love that. Let me continue on. Here's another one, right? Gallup estimates that 42% of employee turnover is preventable, with lack of appreciation and feeling undervalued cited as leading causes. Again, ties to what you just said, right? We can actually prevent turnover if we are making individuals feel valued and appreciated. And that comes from everything from that leader to the platform with recognition to even providing just transparency into financial health or the benefits that are there, etc. Belonging and gratitude. You said this a little bit a while ago, right? Employees receiving regular public or peer recognition are up to 10 times more likely to feel a strong sense of organizational belonging and 40% less likely to report feeling daily stress, worry, or sadness. If you want to double down a little bit more on that, because I think that peer-to-peer and other people is very important.
Yeah, it seems so simple, and I'll be totally frank. Before joining Awardco, I wasn't quite sure about what an always-on daily recognition culture was. But now that I've experienced it, it's unlike anything I've seen. To be able to receive genuine, timely feedback and recognition after a meeting, after a webinar, to get a note from a peer, to get a note from a leader. Sometimes that shows up on the company-wide feed, or if it's a private note, those things go a long way. And I know burnout is preventable. And I know sometimes we want to throw our hands up to the CFO and say, if we could pay people more, they'd stay. And I just think that's an out. I think, unless we're way off in our bands, people will stay if they are being fulfilled in the other areas outside of, financial well-being. And that's where belonging and gratitude and a culture of appreciation come in. And so I thought it was fluffy before joining. I'm like, I don't understand, like, but I'm really into the overall vision of why I joined Awardco, which is how do we build culture and how do we build a culture where people stay and thrive? I saw that happening through these individual moments, and now I'm completely bought in. And so, yeah, look for those ways outside of the compensation and the benefits arena. There are budgets that can be picked up elsewhere, and it can help people feel that they belong and keep them engaged, and then also feel that they're seen and that they're being planned for in terms of their trajectory.
Absolutely. Next one has 81% of employees state that financial wellness benefits, right? One-on-one financial coaching, emergency savings funds, debt management, increase their commitment to staying with their employer. I was reading somewhere recently that people typically expect the organizations they work for to actually provide these things. They're not doing it on their own, right? Nobody goes, and unless, again, there are those higher income earners, etc. But thinking of the modern workforce, they're not going to a financial advisor on their own. They're not, investing in stocks, etc. So they're expecting their employers to provide these types of financial wellness benefits. And I think it's really important not only to provide it, but to reinforce, to talk about it, to make it where its adoption is actually the key, not just offering it. I've seen that a lot. Obviously, I'll talk a little bit about more Rain and how we do a lot of this. But I do think it's important to know that, people actually want this from their employers. And I think the last one I have on here is that 81% of employees say robust financial wellness benefits make them want to stay with their current employer. And we see 96% of the employers confirm that these actually improve retention. We have a lot of statistics within our industries and our current organizations that show us and tell us it works through case studies, video testimonials, as well as we provide employer portals that actually show them what their impacts are. Just to summarize this part, and we continue moving on due to time, like the overall, culmination of, again, everything we're saying is that workplace well-being is very important, and it encompasses so much, including financial health, reward and recognition, culture, the connection, all the different things that it's saying, the mental well-being, making sure physical health is good, they have career growth, etc. Finally, with time that we have, what I want to do is move on to you sharing a little bit more about Awardco. So I have a couple slides for that, and I'll share a little bit more Rain. And then again, if anybody has any questions, we will answer those at the end. So feel free to drop those into the Q&A bucket. I'll pass it to you, Dave, to talk a little bit about Awardco.
Yeah, I really appreciate this. And, we are here to be a resource. I know many HR teams are advocating for this, executive teams, founding teams. How do we create a culture aligned to values that are visible, rewarding that behavior when we see it, and ensuring that people feel valued for the work that they're delivering? And then, also, how do we make sure that as we engage our folks, we hear them and that we institute programs to show that we are learning together and developing together? So, Awardco, you can think of us as that engine through recognition and engagement programming that powers those elements. Like I said, everything across the employee journey, from automated birthdays, service anniversaries, and onboarding, to your everyday peer-to-peer and manager-to-employee recognition programs, to your incentives programs, to your, whether that's across sales or different types of departments, and then also through engagement through our survey tool with actionable insights and feedback that give you the ability to deploy more programs to solve for those cold spots within your organization. And we know that teams need the flexibility to do that. No one company is like the other. And we pride ourselves on building the best technology in our space to give you that leeway to deploy multiple programs. And then ultimately, we need to tie this back to results. And so we do have studies and we do have teams that help create that business case and then track against that business case. Certainly, ENPS is at play. Certainly, retention scores are at play, engagement scores. Those are some ways that we measure success across what we're doing, and a lot more to come. But that's a little bit about us.
Awesome. And I think I have this where really highlighting you guys in the industry. If you want to talk more about your G2 grid, et cetera.
Yeah, we're very fortunate to work with some of the best customers in the world, over 3,000 customers, and as supported by them here, we serve everywhere from SMB, 100 employees, all the way up to one of our largest enterprise organizations of 800,000 employees. So we know every segment, we know the industries that you're dealing with, and we also know what the difference is when you serve a deskless or offline employee, someone who's not behind the desk all the time. And so we pride ourselves in those areas in building the greatest technology in the space, paired with what we believe is the best services consulting arm along with that, because we know this is a journey. This isn't just a one-time institute, something we are here to coach and change manage with you along the way.
Appreciate it, David. And yeah, I completely agree. I mean, all the things that you're saying is fantastic. And what I love is that when you really pair that and think about recognition as a strategy and tie it into financial health, you truly can have this compounding effect when it comes to retention, recruitment, engagement, and so many other downstream impacts, right? As we continue to talk about financial strategy, Range comes in as a solution to mission to empower employees on their journey to financial health, right? We define financial health as a state of having stable income, managing expenses, adequate savings, and access to tools to create short-term security and long-term stability. That's what we do. We help employees move from paycheck to financial resilience, right? It's a one app solution where employees can actually have their complete financial life. They could be liquid with their pay. They could bank, they could save, they could build credit, and it's powered by AI that works in the background on their behalf. They get immediate access to their own earned income. They don't have to go to predatory practices out there from payday lenders, which, fun fact, although it shouldn't be a fun fact, but more payday lenders than McDonald's in the United States. It's a billion-dollar industry, and it's really something that I truly hate, and hence why I'm in this industry. After college, went to a payday lender and got stuck in a cycle, right? You take it out, then a payday, they go in there, they pull it out, but it's not enough to cover everything because of the high interest rate. So you have to actually re-up, and then they take out more, and then 2 weeks goes by, and it keeps going in this cycle until you somehow can figure out how to either make more money or completely borrow money or find some other money and be able to cover it. So it's really predatory, and we really want to kill the payday lender industry. We also hate the late fees that are out there. In 2025, I think it was over $25 billion in late fees and over $25 billion in overdraft fees that the banks are charging. We know there's high interest credit cards, and now individuals are taking out 401k loans at a record number. Honestly, because it's so simple to do. You just log into your Fidelity account, say you want a 401k loan. You don't have to talk to anybody. You don't have to ask the company. You don't have to talk to your payroll person. They just do it, and we're seeing increase in that. And our goal is to remove all of those things and let people just have access to their pay before payday. We already live in an on-demand world where we can get our food when we want, Uber at our fingertips, watch a movie on demand on our phones. People expect to get paid on when they want as well. Our financial health agent for the workforce includes this in this product where we can stabilize, control, and grow individuals, right? We drive financial progress through all that. Stabilize is when someone has maybe a bill due and it's due on Wednesday, but payday is Friday. Well, they can access their earnings for completely at no cost and get a next day transfer on Tuesday, shows up on Wednesday, make that payment and avoid that $65 fee. Or if they have that emergency where they're going down the street, running out of gas to get to work, they could actually go in there and access their earnings instantly for a nominal ATM fee, send it to whatever account of their choice, fill up that gas, and show up to work and actually be there on time. That's what earned wage access does, but it's the tip of the spear. It lets them start plugging the holes so they can actually get better with their finances. Then we have the Visa debit card if they need it because they're unbanked and can't get it elsewhere. We also have this awesome product called Rent Split, where we could actually split their biggest monthly expense so it doesn't have to hit all at once. And it's all done through the payroll process. When we move into the control, it's how do we help them, like with our AI features on Guide Me, and like know that, hey, your bank account shows that you have an expense coming and you don't have enough money. So we'll actually agentically move that money over so that way it's taking care of it and avoiding overdrafts or even spending trends. Like having your actual spend there because you connect your account there, knowing what you're spending on, and then get better. Awareness is such a big thing. We talk about it where I actually have diabetes and type 2, and I have my Dexcom monitor, but just tracking it allows me to know, hey, what I should eat or shouldn't eat. And it's actually been improving every day because of that. Same thing applies when it comes to finances or tax return filing, where we give free options for taxes to do taxes. So that way they don't actually have to use the earned wages and can use their refund to pay whatever they need to plug holes. I'm not going to keep going through all of this stuff, but the idea is we could save, we could build credit. And really, here's the last slide where we, similar to you all, right, recognize an industry. We're working with large enterprise organizations all the way down to smaller mid-market organizations. We have over 1,200 partners or employers that work with us. And then we have hundreds of partners that we integrate with. We were not the first in the earned wage access industry, but we're the fastest growing for three main reasons. One, we focus on more than just earned wage access. It's really the financial health beyond transactions. We stabilize, control, grow. Two, we are simple, secure, and payroll friendly. No disruption because of the technology, minimal data requirements, and we're built for payroll professionals, not against them. And three is our secret sauce, our customer care. We have 24/7 US-based support out of Nashville with 97% annual retention, under 30 seconds response time. And why that matters is the emergencies that people have aren't happening 9 to 5. They're happening at midnight in the ER or late night at the grocery store when they need to buy formula or diapers, etc. So it's happening when people aren't around, and we wanted to make sure our customer service is out there. Either way, what with all of these out there, just really important that you know, like, we can help. In order to truly find out how to help your organizations with our products, we have these two ways to reach out more. One, you can email at awardco@rain.us to book a demo with Rain. And then you could also book a demo with Awardco, going to awardco.com/demo. I have these up there, but what I want to do is, again, open it up now for Q&A so we can maybe answer some of the questions if there are anything. So, Tanya, I'll pass it back to you to moderate.
Thank you, Sho. We do have a couple questions. First question to both of you. What size companies do you both tend to work with? And for Rain, what does usage look like for employees?
Yeah, Dave, I think I heard you from SMB to enterprise, 800,000. That's a massive company. But any other insight on your companies you work with?
Yeah, what I would say there is we know every segment intimately, and we have teams who do nothing but serve that segment. And so whether you're a small business that is bootstrapped or you're a high-flying tech startup or an established enterprise, we're the only one in our industry that serves all segments. There are some other alternatives in our industry that serve enterprise only. There are some that serve SMB only. And so we take all those learning across segments to give each one the best experience. So all the way down to 50 to 100 employees is kind of our base, and then all the way up to as many employees as you can count.
Awesome. On the Rain side, we work with employees of 250 employees, or companies with 250 employees and more. Our largest one, it was one of the logos up there, is 80,000 plus, which is T-Mobile. But we have everybody, that's 250 employees that hire. Typically, we have that threshold because we are a free product. So we work with companies that have the employee population that would allow us to actually generate revenue, since we don't charge any employers. As far as employee usage, that's what the other question was, right, Tanya? For employee usage, it depends on the industry, but what we typically see is actually the highest adoption in the industry. I actually did some research to understand why that was when I joined. And what I learned was, because of our simplicity, very similar to Venmo. When you check out a demo with us, we'll show you how our app looks. It's so similar to Venmo, where you could just click a couple buttons, and then here's a free option, here's an instant option, and you can get your money. People actually adopt. There's no change. There's no bank account they need to change. There's no card they have to use. So people love adopting to our benefit. We have average around 40%, but again, based on industry, I would think hospitality is closer to about 60 to 70%, where some places like healthcare or maybe more professional services are going to be a lower end and makes that average right about 40%.
We have another question.
Go for it.
Have you ever outreached to state government agencies that only get paid once a month?
Great question. And honestly, I think it's an industry with not only state and government, but also education, because they get a lot of times paid monthly, that this benefit would be a great solution. We do have some municipalities currently. We have some universities currently, but it's not as widespread as it should be, basically because it wasn't an early mover in the industry. During pandemic, a lot of healthcare companies and hospitality companies jumped onto the bandwagon and started utilizing this. And it's become really big in both of those industries. Most every like hospital system or healthcare facilities are using it. A lot of restaurants and hotel chains, et cetera, are using it. I believe, state government and education is a new emerging industry and should be somebody that's offering this, especially because of the once a month pay. And the companies that have taken advantage of it, we see a lot of great success with them and actually responses. I just listened to a reference call with I think it was the city of Little Rock, and they were talking about all the impacts that they saw once they rolled it out. So I know there are out there, love to keep helping organizations like that. I'm assuming that was for Rain. I don't know. Dave, if you want to chime in, do you guys do anything specific to industries when it comes to municipalities, state government, et cetera?
We do, yeah. Serve tons of local municipalities, a lot of statewide healthcare practices and universities, and even government agencies. And there are different nuances with nonprofits and government agencies that we work really well around, and understand that sometimes recognition can often be seen as a gift, and it can be, there are different regulations within those different industries, and we know those very well. So one of the many industries we serve.
Awesome. Tanya, back to you. Anything else?
That's all the questions at the moment.
All right. Well, if that's the case, I don't want to keep anybody longer than they need to. If there's no other questions, we appreciate the time. We appreciate you guys listening to this conversation. I think it's important, not only if you look at Rain, look at Awardco, that's great. But I think as a workforce, it's really important to think about these things, right? Culture, leadership, recognition, financial health. Those things are what we're trying to really push, is that these are important things to help those employees out there. And we're hoping there is something that you could take back from here that you could implement in order to truly help your workforce and create better work environments for people. So again, thank you so much for checking out this webinar. And if you want more info, please reach out, and looking forward to talking more.